Today, I'm going to be sharing with you all how moving to Calgary transformed my mental health and lifestyle. So shockingly enough, I am approaching my 6-month return back to Calgary from Toronto, and I thought it'd be a good idea to reflect with you all with how I'm doing. I had a lot of you reach out to me asking if I could talk more about moving in general, addressing some of the mental hurdles that goes along with it, and how I best approached it. So I'm hoping this video does that for you. There was a point in my life last year where I was feeling somewhat hopeless, burnt out, and even a little bit lonely living in Toronto. And I made a couple of videos talking about it that I felt a lot of you resonated with. It felt even a little bit weird because living in Toronto felt familiar because I've been living in that city for so many years. But also at the same time, in the back of my mind, I knew that it wasn't permanent because I knew that I was renting at the time. Commuting was crazy. I felt financially anxious. And then ultimately, I just didn't cultivate a long-term future in that city. Fast forward to present day, I would say that many of the things that I mentioned have been eliminated or significantly diminished for the better. Now you might be wondering what or how exactly did those things just disappear all of a sudden? And I'm going to talk about that in this video. But before we get into it, I would appreciate if you guys could do me a quick favor, smash the like button, ring that notification bell, follow me on Instagram if you haven't done so already, and now let's jump right into it. The main stressor was always feeling financially anxious with money living in Toronto. And I felt like this stemmed from my living situation because I've been renting in that city for years. And I generally felt that entering the Toronto housing market alone felt nearly impossible despite earning a higher income compared to like most Canadians. I realized early on that home ownership wouldn't just suddenly make all these feelings just disappear. And even though I felt like I could buy a 1-bedroom in the coming years, I just didn't felt comfortable depleting my bank account and be left with making like $3,000 mortgage payments each and every single month and being almost house poor. I also knew that living in a condo specifically for the rest of my life in Toronto wasn't how I visioned my future. And a detached house in Toronto is just pretty much unaffordable. During the summer, when I finally made the decision to move to Calgary, one, I knew that Calgary real estate was a lot more affordable, but two, I knew that I wanted to buy real estate myself. Now, I totally get that you can make the argument that renting is cheaper if you actually took your savings and actually put it into an index fund, but for me, psychologically, I knew that I just wanted peace of mind. Like, I was just so sick and tired of being at the mercy of my landlord, not knowing if I could potentially be kicked out, rent increases. Like, I was just sick and tired of that. Of course, I recognize that there's an Ontario tenant board that's supposed to protect you, quote unquote, but I just didn't want to go through all that. I just want to know that this place that I call home was mine and that I didn't have to e-transfer like $1,800 every single month to a landlord who had several other investment properties. You want to know the funny/crazy part about all this? Is that when I actually left my condo/apartment in Toronto, I remember distinctively my landlord asking me,
"Well, Frank, does the unit need any sort of renovations?"
Which I said no. And then fast forward, it turns out that my landlord ended up renting that exact same unit for $2,400, which is $600 more than what I was paying, and I've only been living there for 3 years. This, my friends, is when I knew Toronto was pretty messed up. Now looking at the Calgary Real Estate Board for the end quarter of 2024, we had single detaches going for just under $700,000, a townhouse for under $450K, and apartment/condos under $320,000. And so I ended up buying real estate in Calgary. And despite actually having less actual cash in my bank account, I definitely feel a lot less financially anxious because what felt impossible in Toronto was attainable in Calgary for essentially half the price it felt. Living in Calgary, I definitely feel a lot happier because it sort of just feels like I'm gaining back a lot more time. And this has to do with no longer having to commute long distances that I once did in Toronto. And I felt like I'm getting back my own personal time. So I'm able to do a lot more things in a day, do a lot more activities. And from doing all those things, I feel a lot less stress and more relaxed overall. For example, with shorter commute times in Calgary, I actually feel like I can leave the house multiple times in a day and do all my errands, like go to the gym, do grocery runs, get bubble tea, visit friends, and even have time to edit YouTube videos that in Toronto, you can make the argument that I did do all these things, but it was a lot more taxing and time consuming. Like I wouldn't get home until much later, like say 10 o'clock, maybe 11 o'clock, but I would get home in Calgary a lot earlier. Which is sort of ironic because the people who I have met in Calgary so far, oftentimes they're always telling me things like,
"Oh Frank, like I go to sleep so early, I sleep at like 9:30.
And I'm looking at them like why are you sleeping so early? And when I actually understand what they're going through, they're doing the exact same things like Toronto people. They are going to work, they are making dinner, they are watching Netflix or watching my YouTube videos. Okay, maybe not that. But the point is that because they eliminated the long distances of commuting, oftentimes they wrap up their day by like 7, 8 o'clock. And then by the time they actually get ready for bed, they can hit the pillow closer to like 9, 9:30, even 10 o'clock is considered late for some Calgarians. Even I've noticed when driving my vehicle out in Calgary, it's a lot less stressful. Like the other day, I drove 30 minutes and I just recognized that I wasn't as focused onto the road. Like obviously I'm paying attention, but not in comparison to when I'm in Toronto. In Toronto, I could be driving that exact 30 minutes, but I'm hyper focused. Like I'm observant of all my surroundings, from the other vehicles to bike lanes to like idiots who are crossing the roads when they shouldn't. All right, I'll calm down. The point I'm trying to make is that there's definitely a lot more things you need to be aware of when driving in Toronto in comparison to Calgary. And it's funny because I know that people who are not comfortable driving in Toronto because there's a lot more cars, who are comfortable driving in Calgary because there's simply a lot less cars. Next, I want to talk about how living in Calgary and being close proximity to the mountains lowers your levels of stress. And if you really think about it, it's hard not to, because I could have a tough week at work and all I need to do is drive to Banff, hike at Kananaskis, and like tension's gone. This is just my observation, but I have yet to ever go to the mountains so far and see someone who's like so pissed or upset with something. Like it just rarely happens. But whenever I'm in Toronto going to the subway station or around Dundas Square, like I guarantee you, like I promise you, just the vibe, you can just read off people's face that they just seem angry. Like I don't know why. So short story, I once had a colleague of mine that he actually sat right beside me, and this was like my first office job right after school. And he was older than me, but I remember him telling me that after 30 years living in Toronto, that him and his family was leaving the city. And I was like, why? Like, why are you leaving? And he told me that it just felt like the longer he stayed there, each year he just felt more and more angry. And it took me a few years for myself to even recognize, because I was like, I just didn't get it, because Toronto was sick at the time. And I even saw this in myself. As the year progressed, I started to recognize that even I was getting angrier with the city. And I think it had to do with just affordability. You're just kind of sick of that commuting. And all this kind of just builds up over time. I truly believe that human beings weren't designed to spend 8 or 9 hours a day working in a cubicle that society has pushed onto us. Of course, we need to earn a living, but in a concrete jungle city like Toronto, where work is also tied to heavy traffic, high living costs, it feels like it just takes even a greater toll on your mental health. On the other hand, living in Calgary / the West Side allows me to still maintain that Toronto work ethic, that I think there are positive things to what I developed over the years, but also being able to decompress. So like here, I can easily connect with nature, hike up mountains, and take a much needed mental reset, something that I felt was more difficult to achieve in Toronto. Moving to Calgary this time around, I initially thought that making friends or meeting people in general would be difficult because of my past experience of when I first moved here during the pandemic. Things were shut down and the opportunities to meet people were scarce, and thus it felt quite isolating at the time. This time around, I took a different approach. I told myself that I really don't have an excuse because things are actually open in the city this time around. So what I did was I leaned toward things that I already loved doing, which is running and doing fitness classes. So one of the best things that I did was join a run club, who I've met many people through that club. And then secondly, I just continued doing fitness classes. So I just picked some of my favorite fitness classes in the city, whether that's like Barry's, Rumble. Also, not to self-plug here, but I am excited to announce that I am planning to launch a new run club out in Calgary with a few friends of mine who I actually met from another run club, ironically. But we're launching this in around the springtime. There's no real agenda here other than to just build a community and have people find their people, because I get it. I literally been in your guys' shoes like 6 months ago. If you are interested in joining, just know that it's literally free of charge. You just show up, and I'll leave the information in the description, and hopefully I'll see you guys there. Going back to how moving to Calgary has improved my mental health, well, it's to say that meeting new people has definitely made a difference this time around. So there you guys have it. That's how moving to Calgary has transformed my mental health and lifestyle, and that's by positively impacting it. As I said this in the past, moving to Calgary this time around by choice feels the world difference. No longer having to commute long distances is such a big win. And then no longer having to pay rent and not knowing if I could potentially be kicked out or being at the mercy of my landlord, and actually owning real estate in Calgary, it means the world to me. And that's the feeling that I get from living in the city as of right now. Of course, with any city, yes, that includes Calgary, there are pros and cons. But I do genuinely believe if you understand more about yourself and what you like and dislike, you're better to make a decision that fits for you. Like Calgary obviously is a little bit colder, less restaurant options, but affordability is better, housing is a lot better. So I think if you start to understand like who you are, so like I understand that I was more of a nature, outdoor kind of person, and I didn't really care about all the extras that Toronto have, that I started to just recognize that Calgary just made a lot more sense for me at this stage in life. Toronto obviously has a lot more opportunities, things to do, jobs, restaurants, and it kind of just feels like the sky's limit, but only you will know if Calgary, Toronto, or another Canadian city is right for you. So anyhow, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. If you have any sort of question, whether that's real estate or you just want to say hello, let me know in the comment section down below. If you haven't also done so, follow me on Instagram, and I guess I'll see you all in the next one.